Okay, ladies, we're on lesson 4 today, and we're going to be looking at women's struggle for independence. So in the last lesson, we were talking about the suffragette movement, and we were looking at how Irish women fought to get the vote at the beginning of the 20th century. So now they have the vote, and they are turning their attention to the independence movement. So we've already learned about 1916, the War of Independence, the Civil War in Ireland. And women were also involved in this. So you can put your title there as Women's Struggle for Independence. And in your books, it's on page 362 and 363. So what we're going to be looking at today is the role played by Cumann na mBan in the independence struggle. So you should remember, we did talk a little bit about Cumann na mBan when we were talking about 1916 Rising, etc. We're also going to be looking at the role played by Countess Markievicz. So she is a very famous woman from Irish history. And we're going to be looking at the Irish Constitution and how women were viewed when the first Irish Constitution was written in 1937. So those are the three things we're going to look at today. Okay, so Cumann na mBan then. So before we go on, I want you to think to yourselves, what was women's role in society and politics in the early 1900s? So what you've learned so far, what kind of a role did women have? First of all, in society in general, how were they viewed by others? How were they viewed in terms of their work? How were they viewed in terms of what kind of position they were in? And then also in politics. So did they have any role in politics at the beginning of the 20th century, the early 1900s? So just think about that. Okay, we're going to look at a little picture here. We've already looked about this. We've already looked at this picture at the very beginning of this. There's a picture there. Is there anything that you find surprising about this picture? So that picture was taken at the beginning of the 1900s. So based on what we've already learned, anything surprising there about the women in that picture, the way they're dressed? Okay. Then girls, you'll see there's a little video clip, which I'm going to put the link onto the Google Classroom so you can watch that. It's about some of the history of Cumann na mBan. So when you're watching the video, I want you to think about what role did the men want them to do. So Cumann na mBan had been formed. So it was formed to help with the independence struggle. It was formed in 1914 to help with the defence of Ireland. And in this video, you will see some of the opinions of the other men at that time and what they wanted the Cumann na mBan ladies to do. Okay. But then what did they themselves want to do? So when you're watching the video, think about what did the men want them to do? What role did the men see them playing? And also what role did they see for themselves? Okay, so I want you to watch the video and think about those things. Okay, so here's some information about Cumann na mBan. Okay, girls, you can take this down in your copy. The organisation was founded in 1914 to assist in arming and equipping a body of Irishmen for the defence of Ireland. So that's a quote there. That was what their aim was, assist in arming and equipping a body of Irishmen for the defence of Ireland. So helping to get them ready in terms of weapons so that they'd be ready to fight. Countess Markievicz, or Madame Markievicz, was one of the founding members and the most famous member. Then in 1916, it became part of the Irish Volunteers. So the Irish Volunteers was a male kind, like an army. We've already learned about this in terms of the 1916 Rising. So they amalgamated with the Irish Volunteers, or they became a subgroup of the Irish Volunteers. Recruits from Cumann na mBan were from diverse backgrounds. So you had lots of different types of women, but they were mainly middle class. Okay, so they were quite well-to-do women and professional women. So people that were working in professions, maybe teachers, doctors, okay, upper class educated women. But there was also a significant proportion from the working class. So there was a mixture of women from all types of backgrounds. Then in 1916, some of the members of Cumann na mBan were involved in the taking of the GPO. Okay, so when the Irish rebels took over the GPO, some of the members were involved directly in that. But during the 1916 Rising, they also worked in the Red Cross, so they would help with first aid. They worked as spies or intelligence agents in the lead up to this rising, and after the rising they would go around collecting information, and in the transferring of weapons. Okay, so they would be used to transfer weapons from one place to the next, because I suppose at that time there'd be less suspicion about women than there would be about men. They could maybe get away with things a little bit easier because they wouldn't be as high suspects as some men would. Then, so girls, they were involved in the rising, in the struggle for the War of Independence. And then we've already learned about the Anglo-Irish Treaty. So we've learned how Michael Collins went to England along with his delegates, with his group, to debate and to discuss the Anglo-Irish Treaty. And we've learned that when they came back, there was a split, and many people didn't agree that the treaty should have been signed at all because it didn't really get the independence that Ireland wanted. So in 1922, after they had returned with the treaty, there was a vote taken, and the majority of women in Cumann na mBan rejected the treaty. Okay, so that will tell you that they were quite hardline Republicans. They were very strong-minded, and they wanted independence, full independence for Ireland, and they weren't happy with what the Anglo-Irish Treaty had brought. Okay, so one of the most famous women of the time was Madame Markievicz, or Countess Markievicz. You'll find some information about her in your book on page 362. But what I'd like you to do is I'd just like you to have a little research yourselves just on the internet and see, can you get a couple of bits of information about her? Okay, so in your copies, I want you to try and write down a few bits of information about Countess. Okay, girls, the next thing I want you to do, I don't have it on the PowerPoint here, but if you go to your book on page 363, there's a section there about the first constitution in Ireland. So a constitution basically is a list of rules that a country is going to be run by. And the constitution is extremely important because it tells us like what the country is going to be like. Okay, what kind of laws are going to be. So in the first constitution, there were some things written in there, particularly for women. For example, divorce and contraception were banned. So I suppose that's for men and women, but also women were not allowed to sit on juries. Okay, so women were not allowed to take part in jury duty. They weren't allowed to play their role there in the legal system. There was also a marriage bar introduced, okay, in the 1930s, which said that when a woman got married, she had to give up her job if she was working in the civil service. So if she was a teacher or if she was working in some kind of a government office, when she got married, she had to give up her job. So I want you to look there at page 363 about some of the statements there that are about women and how women were seen in 1930s Ireland, what their role was. Okay, and then I'm going to give you a short activity to do out of your skills book as well. So I'll post that on the Google Classroom for you to do. Okay, so just to recap, girls, today we were talking about the role that women played in the fight for Irish independence. We looked at Cumann na mBan. We looked at what kind of things they did. And we also talked about Countess Markievicz, who was a very famous woman of this time in the fight for independence. And let's just think about how different these women are from the traditional view of women at that time. Okay, so traditionally there was a very conservative view that their place was in the home, looking after children, cooking, cleaning, low levels of education. But what we've seen today is that there was a group of women who were very different from these kind of traditional views of women. Okay, so that is women in the struggle for independence.